Welcome, and thank you for standing by. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. All participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I would now like to turn the conference over to Kim Davis. You may begin.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for another Census Academy webinar. Today's presentation is utilizing OnTheMap for emergency management for recovery during a natural disaster. We're recording today's webinar, and it will be available on Census Academy within the next 2 weeks. We have over 100 participants today, so we may not be able to address all questions at the end of the session. There will be contact information provided at the end for follow-up. During the webinar today, we will not be able to provide information about the 2020 census. Please refer to 2020census.gov for updates on the 2020 census operations. I have with me today my co-hosts Deb Rivera and Anthony Amargitaggio, and our presenter today is Erling Dowell. Erling Dowell is a program analyst for the Data User Trade and Outreach branch at the U.S. Census Bureau. Erling has been promoting and training people on LEHD products for over 10 years. LEHD makes available several online applications for dissemination and visualization to the public throughout quarterly workforce indicators, LEHD origin destination, employment statistics, and job-to-job data sets. These applications include OnTheMap, OnTheMap for emergency management, LED extraction tool, QWI Explorer, and job-to-job flow explorer. Prior to joining the LEHD program, Erling played a key role during the 2010 census in the Public Information Office and taught communication courses at the College of Southern Maryland. I'd like to welcome our presenter now, Erling Dowell.
Thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 hurricane season. My name is Erling Dowell, as Kim mentioned, and I'm a program analyst for the Data Users Trade and Outreach branch, specializing in the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics, or LEHD program data products. Today, I will be focusing on how to utilize OnTheMap for emergency management and also touch a little on its sister map, OnTheMap. I'm excited to highlight some of the features for OnTheMap for emergency management and possibly show you something useful and valuable. This webinar will demonstrate how easy it is to move through this application and be able to answer questions such as where should response efforts concentrate and where vulnerable populations live and work in the impacted area. Here's an agenda of how our presentation will go. First, we'll start with an overview of the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics program and where its resources come from to create these innovative products. Then I'll talk about all of the bells and whistles OnTheMap for emergency management has to offer and show you real-time events happening in the U.S. Finally, we'll do some live demos of OnTheMap for emergency management and OnTheMap and show current examples of how data and the applications are being used. Unlike the American Community Survey and the Economic Census and the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics program is not dependent on survey responders. LEHD is a unique link between employer and employee data for the U.S. Of course, you cannot talk about LEHD without talking about the Local Employment Dynamics, or LED, which is a voluntary federal-state partnership that was developed in 1990 with just a few states. Its main purpose is to merge employee data and employer data to produce a collection of enhanced labor market statistics with state-of-the-art confidentiality protection. Under the partnership, states send their unemployment insurance, or UI, wage records and their quarterly Census of Employment Wage Data, or QCEW, to us, which then is combined with censuses and surveys to create new dynamic information on workers to produce public use data products, as well as microdata for research. The UI record gives us jobs data, the QCEW gives us firm data, and our person data comes from censuses and surveys. Currently, LEHD has 3 main data sets and 2 experimental data sets. Each data set has an application for easy access. Each data set, along with each data tool, is unique in its own way. If you are curious about employment, hires, separations, turnovers, and earnings, you would look at the Quarterly Workforce Indicator, or QWI, utilizing the QWI Explorer or the LED Extraction tool. However, the lowest geography level is county, and you cannot connect where the worker lives and where the worker works. If you want to look at statistics on job mobility across state boundaries or industries, transitions between jobs by timing and firm or worker characteristics, or earning changes due to job changes, you would use our job-to-job or J2J flows data using the J2J Explorer, but the lowest geography level is the metropolitan areas. If you want to look at employment for detailed and customized geography, you would look at the LEHD Origin-Destination Employee Statistics or LOADS data using OnTheMap or OnTheMap for Emergency Management data tools. However, there is more than an annual lag, and it has less detail on firm person characteristics. One sidebar, OnTheMap for Emergency Management is the only data tool in LEHD that has population data, along with data from other federal agencies. One of our newer data sets is the Post-Secondary Employment Outcomes, or PSEO. This experimental data set reports earnings by institution, degree field, degree level, and graduation cohort for 1, 5, and 10 years after graduation and is accessible through the PSEO Explorer. The current release includes the University of Texas system, the public institutions in Colorado, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Future releases are in the works. Finally, we just released our new data set, Veteran Employment Outcomes, or VEO. This new experimental data set reports earnings and employment outcomes for U.S. Army veterans 1, 5, and 10 years after discharge by military occupation, rank, demographics, industry, and geography of employment. This is also accessible through our VEO Explorer. In addition to the data tools, raw data downloads are available along with LEHD microdata for approved projects through our secure census research data centers. OnTheMap for Emergency Management has been named mission critical by the Department of Commerce. That means if anything should happen, such as a shutdown, the application will continue to be available to the public. OnTheMap for Emergency Management can be used to assess workforce impacts. It can identify the number and location of affected workers. It can examine workforce demographics. It can identify affected industries. It visualizes where affected workers live. It can also be used to assess population and housing impacts. It identifies the number and location of affected residents. It examines population demographics of affected areas. It identifies vulnerable population groups, and it examines housing characteristics of affected areas. It can also be used for emergency preparedness and response planning and answer questions such as, where should response efforts concentrate? Are there special or vulnerable population segments? And can we uncover surrounding communities with secondary effects to the workforce? OnTheMap for Emergency Management tracks tropical storms and hurricanes, floods, freezing temperatures, and snowfalls, all from data from our sister agency, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. OnTheMap for Emergency Management also tracks fires from data from the Department of Agriculture and Department of Interior. And finally, disaster declaration areas from Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, combined with census data for ACS, decennial, and loads. On the Map for Emergency Management can assist in identifying vulnerabilities, social vulnerabilities, physical vulnerabilities, and economic vulnerabilities. Using the ACS, or the American Community Survey, we can see social vulnerabilities. We can see households with one or more people 65 years or over. We can see if they are disabled, and we can see if they are at the poverty level. Using the decennial data, we can access the physical vulnerabilities, whether a house is occupied or vacant, what type of housing and how old the home is, and what type of heating is being used. And to understand the economic vulnerabilities of the event using the loads data, we can look at total number of workers in the impacted area, the industry impacted in the area, and earnings for money lost to workers in the impacted area. This screenshot was taken on June 4th. As you can see, our first tropical storm of the season, Cristobal, is headed toward the Gulf Coast and could impact states Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and 4 other states, with an affected population of 14,341,560. Let's look at some of the features. On the left is a list of current events happening in the U.S. The map shows current events of disaster declaration, floods, and fires, and snowfalls. There are a few ways to get to the event. You can use the list on the left, you can click on the map to the event, or you can type in the search box. On the right, there is a plus sign that gives you a legend. We can first see, for the event types, tropical storms, which are a green cloud. And then we can see wildfires are red flames. Floods are the floating yellow homes. And then for winter weather, we have the pink snowflake for forecasted snowfalls, and then we have the blue snowflake for forecasted freezing rain. You can also choose from different base maps. So you can choose terrain, satellite, or road. And there is a zoom in at the bottom for Hawaii and Alaska. Just a reminder, On the Map for Emergency Management does not track tornadoes, earthquakes, tidal waves, lava flows, or viruses. But if it is deemed a FEMA disaster declaration, then the impact is covered on the Map for Emergency Management. Let's go live to Cristobal and check out other states that are impacted by this tropical storm and find out its vulnerabilities. Just as a suggestion, all LEHD data tools work best with Firefox and Chrome. So if you would go to the URL, if you're able to, go to onthemap.ces.census.gov/EM. All right, so I hope everyone can see my screen, and I pulled it up to the On the Map for Emergency Management. So this is today's date. On the left side of the map is a list of events with Cristobal at the top. As we mentioned earlier, the states affected are Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and 4 others, but that was from June 4th. So as you can see, it's kind of updated. And now we have affected states are Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and 1 other state. And also the affected population changed to 7,143,018. So let's change the date back to June 4th for the purpose of this webinar. But before we go, I just wanted to show you on the map, you can see that there are some snowfalls in the northwest area, and then we have some flooding in the central area, and then the whole map is covered with FEMA disaster declaration areas. So you can see the the life preservers in orange, but that's because a lot of the states have been declared disaster declaration areas due to the COVID-19. But you can also see that the Cristobal is now a tropical depression, and his form has actually changed from when it was June 4th. So anyway, on the left-hand side where it says events as of 6/9/2020, there's a little calendar next to it. And I'm going to click on that and change the date to June 4th because that's the way this webinar is set up. It's set up for June 4th. So going into Cristobal, you see that it's Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and still one other state. We'll click on that on the left-hand side. Sorry, it's moving a bit slow. So I'm going to have to go back in and change my date again to June 4th. Everybody must be doing this with me for cause of the slowdown. So let me go back to my PowerPoint and then just go through that. So when we pull up the tropical storm Cristobal, we can look at different social vulnerabilities. We can look at the ability to speak English by language spoken at home, disability status by poverty status, or disability by status by age. We can also look at disability status by age and click on 65 years and over living alone. That population is 907,000 plus. The other thing that happens is that the map updates to show the vulnerable population. On the right, you can see the legend where it says the lighter shade of blue represents 0 to 3 square miles, and the darkest blue represents 375 to 1,648 of those 65 or over living alone. So this data is captured by the American Community Survey. We can also look at some of the physical vulnerabilities. Let's see if my map has, okay, no, it hasn't. So I'm just going to go in, and then I'm going to change the date here where it says June 8th up at the top. I'm going to go ahead and click on June 4th, and if it plays nicely with us, I hope so. Otherwise, we're going to just use today's date. Okay, I think it's playing nicely with us. Yes, there we go. Okay, so this is what it was predicting on the 4th. And this, as you can see, is the forecast of the cone of uncertainty. And then initially, if I go up here where it says detail by, I can click on the arrow and change it to geography. And here are the other 4 states that we were talking about. So the affected areas on June 4th was Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Missouri, and Oklahoma. Now, if I go back to where it says detail by and change that back to characteristics, and now we can look at the vulnerability. So we'll go ahead and click on disability status by age, and then scroll down the table on the left, and then I'll click on 65 years and over, and then as you can see, the map is wanting to update along with the legend where I read from the screenshot that we had on the PowerPoint presentation. Here it is. And then we can change this to the physical vulnerability, or we can look at physical vulnerability by scrolling down, and we can see the year the structure was built. So here we can see homes that were built 2014 or later, along with those that were built 1939 or earlier. So that's a big chunk of it. And then another physical vulnerability would be housing heating fuel. So here, this is looking at the possibilities of homes that may have outages when you're doing your planning in emergency response. So we can see here that there is a possibility of 3,425,098 being affected by possibly a power outage. And then the final physical vulnerability that I wanted to show you was mobile homes. So during storms, especially things such as tornadoes, we can see that in that area, there's about 7,312,576 total housing units, but among that is 912,032. All right, so moving on, let's see. So one more thing I wanted to show you just before we go. So if I click on event area where it's blue and underlined and bold, and then a box pops up and it tells me geography type, I can click on this and get down to counties and places. So I went ahead and clicked on places, and you know, everyone's always worried about New Orleans. So if I type in new into the search box, New Orleans comes at the top. So I'll go ahead and click on New Orleans to update the data that we're looking at. And now we can see data for New Orleans. And then continue to look at the different vulnerabilities. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So as you know, during hurricane season, OnTheMap for Emergency Management tracks tropical storms and hurricanes to give you a forecast of the potential impacted area. So let's look at Dorian. Dorian was the fourth active Atlantic hurricane in 2019 and ended up being a Category 5 with 185-mile winds. This article preceded the actual impact of the hurricane on September 6th. Just like the map from the article, this is the forecast area of the cone of uncertainty from August 31st. The impact was predicted to be the entire state of Florida, Alabama, and part of Georgia, affecting over 23 million people. But when the storm actually made landfall a week later, it barely brushed the eastern coastline. The actual impact affected half of what was predicted, which was 11 million, but it's always best to expect the worst. Let's go live to try to work this out. So here, an easy way to go back to the front page is if you click on this close in the right-hand corner, and then that'll take you back to the current map, or actually to the June 4th. But I'm going to go ahead and click on Dorian. I'm going to click on the search box and type in Dorian. So it automatically pops up Hurricane Dorian, but if you're looking for something, for example, like a state, and you're looking for, information on that, you can use this search filter, and it'll take out everything except for whatever type of event you're looking at, whether it's tropical storm, wildfires, floods, winter weather, or disaster declaration areas. So I'll go ahead and click on Hurricane Dorian. And I'll hold my breath. But anyway, it's supposed to show you, I was going to show you how to change it to the forecast area, which we actually did with Cristobal. So you can see the event class here on the left-hand corner and the arrow, and you would change it to forecast area, cone of uncertainty, which was the date of August 31st. And then in this one was when hurricane actually impacted. So that was Saturday, September 7th, and that was the actual impact. Let me see if, nope, still rolling. All right, let's talk about something else. So using another real example, in this article on South Dakota as an example, In a recent article, the loads data was used to track where workers from a large pork plant in Minnehaha County, South Dakota resided. The data showed that many that worked in Minnehaha also lived in Minnehaha, but the next largest numbers of workers resided in Lincoln County. The data also found a number of Native Americans who worked at the plant and resided on nearby reservations, where there is a lack of medical resources to a vulnerable population. So here, let's see. I'm going to try to go in again. So here, if I know I did some research ahead of time and know that there is a FEMA disaster declaration in the state of South Dakota, which is EM-3475. So it comes up automatically. And yay, it's playing nicely on this one, so good. So here, you can also use the filter on the right, that I told you earlier. But here, we can see that this is the FEMA disaster declaration for South Dakota, EM-3475. And if you clicked on the bold blue underline EM-3475, that would take you straight to the FEMA page. You can go back to the EM page, and then you can export the map to a KML and the table to a CSV. You can also share the unique URL for this event here where it says share. And you can click on that URL and copy it and send it to anyone that you want to look at it. And then, as I said earlier, you can also export anything. So one of the things I wanted to show you for this is that if we go to the event area here on the left-hand side and click on that, and then we're going to change it to counties. And then you can see Minnehaha is at the top. So I'll go ahead and click Minnehaha. I think that's a fun word to say. Makes me want to laugh every time I say Minnehaha. Anyway, so here we can zoom into Minnehaha and just look at the effect there in that city or in that county regarding COVID-19. And then, again, you can do the different vulnerabilities, such as, let's see. We're going to change it. We're going to change the characteristics to origin destination. And now we're looking at the worker in Minnehaha. And then let's go ahead and change this. Change to cities for me. So anyway, I apologize for that. But so here is the EM-3475. Here's the Minnehaha County. And then we're able to look at different things that are affected. So let's go to its sister map, OnTheMap. And if you type in onthemap.ces.census.gov, or back here on the OnTheMap for Emergency Management up in the right-hand corner, you can click on OnTheMap and it should take you straight to the On the Map. So now let's go ahead and type in Minnehaha into the search box and click on search. So OnTheMap is a web-based mapping and reporting application that shows where workers work and where they live. It provides companion reports on age, earnings, industry, distribution, race, ethnicity, educational attainment, and sex. And we have data from 2002 to 2017 for most of the 50 states, including DC. However, there is no data for Alaska and South Dakota in 2017. So the data we're going to be using is 2016. And we also, just to let you know, don't have federal data in 2016 and 2017, but hopefully that will be updated at the end of this summer. You can also customize the selection area as low as the census block with disclosure protection, and input-output reports are available, which means you can import and export shapefiles and download and print reports. So here, I typed in Minnehaha, and as you can see on the left-hand side, in bold, under counties is Minnehaha, so I'm going to click on that. So just to let you know, all of our data tools are very intuitive. So if you're going to see a blue underline bold text, chances are you could probably click on it. So once I clicked on the Minnehaha counties, then a pop-up comes out of the selected area. And you can see how many square miles of the selected area is and how many census blocks is in that area. So I will go ahead and click on Perform Analysis on Selection Area. And then we have a settings box. So in the first column, it says Home or Work. So this is where you can look at where the worker lives or where the worker works. In the next column, it gives you 5 different types of analyses that you can choose from. So the area profile is an overview of the selected area. The area comparison, you can compare geography, earnings, industries, age, sex, all the way down to zip codes and census blocks. Distance direction tells you how many miles people are traveling into the area and how many and what region they're coming from. So are they coming from the north, the south, the east, or the west? And then destination tells you where they're coming to work in the selected area. And you can choose which destination type, whether it's places, counties, census blocks. And then inflow, outflow are how many people travel into the area to work, how many people live and work within the area, and how many people travel out of the area to work. So the year here has 2017 all the way to 2002. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have data for 2017, but I'll go ahead and click on 2016 and unclick 2017. And then the job type, so all jobs, every single job out there. Primary jobs are the jobs that bring home the most income. And then if it's all private jobs and private primary jobs, it's just that. It's just primary jobs versus federal jobs. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it as I have it right now. We're going to look at the area profile as an overview. And then, as I said, lightning bolt with bold go and an exclamation point means to click on that. So it automatically zooms into the selected area, which is Minnehaha. And you can see on the right-hand side, the total primary private jobs is about 105,195 workers. So just to scroll down to show you what we have worker age, we have earnings. We can look at the next industry sector, so we can see what is in manufacturing. So we have about 10,760 in manufacturing. We can scroll down, and again, we can look at American Indian or Alaska Native alone, which is 1,687. So this is, the data for that area. And then here on the left-hand side, we have the legend that tells us what represents the dots and the overlay. So the overlay is density of jobs per square miles, while the dots are jobs per square mile. So let's go ahead and change the settings on the left-hand side down at the bottom, and I'm going to change it to destination. And I'm going to click on destination type, change it to counties, because the article talked about counties. So saying that Minnehaha was the #1 area where the workers were coming from, and the second county, it said, was Lincoln. So if you see on the right-hand side, this is the top 10 counties where workers go to the selected area. So Lincoln County does come in second. So one of the things that I like to show, just to give a visual, is if on the left-hand side under map controls, I'll click on this spoke overlay, and it gives me the 10 different ways or areas that the workers are coming to the selected area. You can also do this. This is one of my favorite things. If I click on identify, close out the box, and click on one of the spokes, it actually tells me I've clicked on Minnehaha, how many workers are in that area, what their ages are, what their earnings are, and what industry segments they are in. Okay, and then I wanted to give you a visual. So I know that there's about 60-ish counties in the area. So if I change this to top 10 and make it, 50, let's look at 50, just to give you a visual of how many people that live in work in Minnehaha and where they're all going. So when you look at the idea of the virus possibly spreading, this gives you a really good visual. All right, well, now this is just some helpful links for all of you, and we have the OnTheMap for emergency management, and then there's an area for help and documentation, which will walk through everything that we did, same with the demos and user guides. Also, the Census Academy offers ongoing updates for users to access training via upcoming classes, recorded webinars, data gems, and this presentation will be posted to YouTube and linked to the Census Academy under the Webinars tab once editing is complete. We also would like everyone to stay connected with us through all our social media outlets. And if you have any questions regarding this presentation or anything LEHD, please feel free to contact me. Or if you have other questions, you can send them to census.askdata@census.gov. And finally, here's the contact information for the application team. If you are having issues within the application, you can send them a message and they will be able to see where you have had the problems within the application. So with that, I thank you for your attention and your patience and your grace for when the application wasn't playing so well, but I'm ready to take any questions at this time.
We will now begin our question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, press *1 from your phone, unmute your line, and speak your name clearly when prompted. Participants can ask one question as well as a follow-up. Again, if you would like to ask a question, press *1. One moment as we wait for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Arlene. This is Deb Rivera, and I just wanted to see if you had an opportunity now to answer just a few questions that came in via the chat.
Sure.
Okay, this question comes from Yeli, and Yeli wants to know, are we able to identify nursing homes or assisted living centers with the OnTheMap tool?
The only way we're able to do that would be through the industry. So we could see where the industry is. So if it's health care and social assistance is the only way we can locate that. And then we would only be able to see how many workers are in that area.
Okay, thank you very much. And then one other question, this question came from Brian, and Brian wants to know, is there a way to include persons with disabilities in these maps?
So on the map for emergency management, yes, we have the disability. We don't have what type of disability, but the data comes from the American Community Survey. Other than that, on the map or in the loads data, we do not have disability.
Okay, thank you very much for answering those questions. Skylar, did any questions come in via the phone?
We have one from Byron Shorty from the Navajo Nation. Your line is now open.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask if there was any sort of reliability assessment regarding tribal areas specifically.
So yes, in the loads data, we do have that information. Here on the base map, if you're looking at the screen, I'm pulling it up now. So on the base map, we can actually go in there and look at the tribal lands and tribal subdivisions. And if I click on that, it'll come up, and you just kind of have to zoom into it. Right now, my map is so busy with the spokes. But if you just go in and do it that way, and then you can, let me reload it. But Brian, to answer your question, yes.
Oh,
we can see,
so
how many workers are in the, in the reserves, the reservations, I'm sorry, and then where they're going to work. So you can also just go back to the beginning, and you can see how we have tribal lands too. So you can put in whatever tribal land that you're looking for in the search, and then click on tribal lands, and then we would get that information.
Skylar, do we have any other questions in the queue?
There are currently no further questions in queue.
All right. Thank you so much, Arlene. Thank you for your wonderful presentation, and thank you, everyone, for participating today. We want to remind you about the evaluation link, and you should have received that via the chat, and you will also have it available once you exit from the WebEx event screen. We do value your opinion, and we would really like you to complete the evaluation. If you have any feedback for us, or perhaps any topics that you would like to see us cover in a future occasion. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to having you in our next presentation. The next webinar in this series will be on June 24th, and it will be on the topic of U.S. Census Bureau data for the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that will take place at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you to my colleagues for all of the support that you've provided today. And everyone, have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you for your participation in today's conference. You may disconnect at this time. Speakers stand by.